Yeah, we'll count up here. Give Cecil some snippets.
Some editing room.
Some editing room, exactly. A little bit of padding. These things that never happen if you just listen to the podcast. All right, let's go live. Will the journey we've taken with Ronald Jones be worth it in the end? That and more this week on the couch. Davis Mattek, welcome back. It has been some ups, some downs, some thrills, some chills, embarrassments, and finally triumph in week 10 for Ronald Jones. Where's this all headed? Tell us about your journey with Ronald Jones this year.
So I think this is a mistake that people make with Ronald Jones, is he's not great. Ronald Jones is not Dalvin Cook. He's not Alvin Kamara. He's not even Ezekiel Elliott, right? And those guys are rare talents, right? We can argue about the value of running backs and the contracts they get and whatever, but clearly Ronald Jones is not one of those guys. And I think the mistake that people make is that because Ronald Jones is not one of those guys, they put him in the CJ Anderson bucket, the David Montgomery bucket of like, well, it just doesn't matter. And that's not Ronald Jones, right? Ronald Jones is fast. I think he is a really intuitive runner, and that causes him to make a lot of mistakes. Ronald Jones makes a lot of mistakes because, I got to be honest with you, I don't think Bruce Arians has been a very good coach to him. I think that Ronald Jones is so worried about fumbling and about dropping the ball that some of what comes really natural to him, he doesn't feel comfortable doing because he's so focused on not fumbling. He's so focused on catching the ball with both hands and not dropping it, right? But yeah, I mean, because that's what he knows. Is he knows, if I drop the ball, then Leonard Fournette gets to come in, and I want to play, so I want to do what is asked of me. But I think the big thing with Ronald Jones is our buddy Rich Rebar said this the other day on Twitter. He's kind of like the Josh Allen of running backs, where you just got to let him be, because if you give Ronald Jones 250 touches over the course of the year, is he going to fumble some? Is he going to drop some passes? Absolutely. But I will just guarantee you right now, 250 Ronald Jones touches are far better for your professional football team than 250 Leonard Fournette touches. I'll just guarantee you're going to get better results.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that Ronald Jones is having a great year for where you drafted him. I mean, even if you drafted him at the peak price, right? Because there was like 2 weeks there where he was going in the 5th round. Even if you drafted him there, you're still feeling good. He probably has won you on his own 3 individual games this year if you just started him. And for people who were drafting him after Leonard Fournette signed, I mean, he's been the best player on your team because he is the 9th highest scoring running back in fantasy football, and you could draft him in the 9th round. I mean, he is having just as impressive of a season, relatively speaking, to, James Robinson, right? And I think it's the negative Rojo people are so vocal, and they have painted themselves. They've painted themselves into such a corner that all he has to do is be serviceable, and they look wrong. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, it was a polarizing situation, and I wasn't maybe necessarily quite as strong as you were, but actually I remember a couple of times going into hot take land about Fournette when he was released, and there was a lot of anticipation. Where's he going to land? And I just thought that he was more average than his numbers indicated or his usage indicated. And I was open to Ronald Jones, but I think you encapsulated his game well. And nice nod to Rich that he's a running back who is going to have a wide range of outcomes, like on touches within a game. But if you give him enough volume, what he has will come to the surface. And he's really reinvented himself as a strong and combative back that I don't remember seeing. He was more of like a Jamal Charles type.
He was a glider, right?
Yeah, exactly. He was a glider.
He was a glider. And I mean, honestly, I think what's happened is whoever trains him, right? Whoever, I don't know what his agent is or what his situation is, but my guess is they looked at the situation. They're like, dude, they literally won't play you on 3rd downs. Like they're playing LaShawn McCoy over you. So we got to bulk up. We got to run north and south. We got to get you, bench pressing and getting your shoulders big every day, because they don't want to let you glide. They want you to get 4 yards in a cloud of dust. And
Mhm.
he is because if you go back and watch him at USC, and you liked him coming out of college, I didn't really think he was a particularly great college player because he didn't catch any passes.
Right.
And that's what we really look for with these running backs, especially for dynasty, is we want to be like, he can catch 50 passes right away. And I did not see that for Ronald Jones, but you're right. He's really reinvented himself and turned himself into a Bo Scarborough, times 5 in the NFL,
And the 98-yard run was just confirmation that his speed, that was his defining trait
still
at
there.
USC, it's still there.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about that is next 2 weeks and the mix for great games. Tampa and the Rams, great game. Tampa and Kansas City, wow, great game. Now, I don't know if they're going to be Ronald Jones games, and then they have their week 13 bye. But then after that, where this all culminates is Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit. Oh my God, Detroit. In week 16. Yeah. And you hope, and this is where we get to rational coaching, because unlike, say, James Robinson, where you understood the coach's view of him, the quarterback's view of him, like how he was going to play in the role of his role in the game plan. Not maybe the game plan, maybe they abandoned the run too quickly against Houston the first time, things like that. Whereas with Ronald Jones, it feels like it's this hot and cold thing with how he's used, how early he's used, how often he's used, or just the Tampa offense, like when they vanished against New Orleans. But if they get the rational coaching memo here that Ronald Jones can give you 98-yard touchdown runs, so give him opportunities to do that, then he's a league winner in weeks 14 to 16 because this offense is allowing them to control the game. So I feel like we may look back at Ronald Jones because I think if people look Davis right now and they looked at the rushing leaders in the NFL, like of course Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, of course, and then there's Ronald Jones. I mean, he's right there,
Jones, number 3.
Yeah. So I think that he's creeping up on people and it might surprise people. And if their trade deadline hasn't passed, someone might not realize what they have.
And by the way, I bet that if the person in your league isn't me or Pat Corain, you can probably take him on the cheap in Dynasty too. I bet a 2021 second round pick gets it done for Ronald Jones right now. And look, I mean, McCoy gone, right? Fournette, he'll be on a new team. Chiefs will probably sign him to a 3-year deal, and we'll have to deal with that or something here in the offseason. And then it's going to be Ronald Jones, and it's going to be Keyshawn Vaughn, who, to be frank, I mean, I think Keyshawn Vaughn is the most average player in the could Keyshawn Vaughn be a good fantasy running back if he got 18 touches a game? Sure. But he will never be the type of player who has the kind of burst and, agility that gets a coach excited during practice, right? He's not going to be out there, making the coaches murmur at practice, right? He's just a very average running back. So I think Jones is a buy in every format.
Yeah, regrettable Vaughn pick by the Bucks. And I still remember when Adam Harstad pointed out like 3 months ago that Jones's dynasty ADP was lower, like as in later, than his redraft, even though he was like 23 or, didn't make any sense. So hopefully he got in on that. So now Davis is since we talked rational coaching, and again, it hinges on Jones holding up his part of the bargain. It's again, Bruce Arians does tell the truth. He says it's Ronald Jones' job as long as he plays up to it, basically, and he certainly did last week. Now it's when you can whisper sweet nothings in my ear about rational coaching in Indianapolis, and that Nyheim Hines, what we saw on Thursday, won't be an illusion, but it could be the new reality.
Well, Frank Reich is a rational coach, but rationality doesn't always mean doing the thing that gets me the most yards every single play.
Right.
Because they selected Jonathan Taylor with, what was it, pick 34, I think?
Right.
Yeah, so...
it was after Pittman. Pittman was 34, Taylor's like 40.
40, 43, something like that. So that means, one, I mean, this is a team that's in win-now mode. Maybe they re-sign Rivers. Maybe Rivers runs it back next year. Maybe he doesn't. But this is a team that wants to win the Super Bowl this year or next year. So that's a real asset. You can't be throwing away second-round picks when you want to win Super Bowls. And presumably they made that Jonathan Taylor selection because they Phillip Rivers, he's old. They don't want him throwing 45 times a game. And I think it's unlikely that this team reaches their ceiling giving Jordan Wilkins 11 touches a game. So I think they use Jordan Wilkins because they trust and like Wilkins. They think he's better than Jonathan Taylor right now. They like Hines in the role he's in. Hines would get more touches than Wilkins if Jonathan Taylor wasn't playing, if he wasn't active. But
right.
I think the rationality comes in of saying, like, to get to this next level of a team, we have to have Jonathan Taylor threatening to break off 60-yard touchdown runs at the drop of a hat. And it's definitely we're not going to get it done if we can't convert third and shorts with Jonathan Taylor, which is like why we drafted him. So I think it's a gross three-way split. However, for me, I mean, I do think Hines scores the most fantasy points the rest of the way.
It probably is gross. I just hope that Reich gets clarity that, well, I mean, Taylor, I think that you have to keep trying Taylor and hope that he progresses past running blind, things slow down for him. Wilkins, Thursday, I felt like Wilkins had one of those performances that shows you the bench, because there were 3 different occasions, and it wasn't necessarily all on him, but when the game focused on him at a fulcrum, at a point in the game where it was going to turn, he played small every time. And I would just hope that they see that Hines is the player that's going to maximize their offense. Like maybe every game it goes like that, right? Like it takes the first, second, like Russell Wilson before this year. Like, okay, by the fourth quarter when you have to win, you realize you have to trust your best players. What do you think about Pittman, by the way? I mean, do you think there's some staying power to what he did on Thursday night since we brought him up?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've been saying this. Everyone, at least everyone I trust has been saying this is the rookie wide receiver class. And, Pittman, in terms of like comparables as a prospect, I mean, he could have gone in the first round. If the Vikings would have taken Pittman at 20 over Jefferson, I wouldn't have been like, oh, well, that's stupid. They have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, Pittman is the thing that's interesting about Pittman is, Rager and Jefferson and Lamb and Judy and Ruggs, they're all the new prototype, right? They're all 6'1" or shorter. They're all 205 or less. They're all really fast and they're all great route runners. But Pittman is like the perfect wide receiver prospect in 2014, right? He's 6'3", he's 215. He can jump out of the gym. He has these giant hands. And I still think that player has a big role in the NFL today. It's just a different role, right? Pittman is not going to be running precise. He's not going to have the Judy highlight reels of like making the cornerbacks trip over their own feet, but he'll be more of like an Alshon Jeffrey style, go up and get the contested catch. And that has a real role in the NFL too. And I think Pittman, I mean, the buying window is going to be it's tougher now because he had his breakout game. But if you could have traded for Pittman, when he was dealing with the compartment syndrome in dynasty leagues, I mean, that was a great time to try and go and get him.
And in redraft, he might be out there. You might be out there to pick up
for sure.
Indianapolis, Green Bay this week. That's a fascinating game. Tennessee, and then you got that Houston, Pittsburgh week 16, which that's not necessarily negative. Facing the Steelers as a passing game. But yeah, Pittman looking good on those crosswing routes. The name, because of Phillip Rivers, like Vincent Jackson comes up, as a comparison. But Pittman's pretty skilled. Like we think of the big receiver relying more on traits, but he's skilled for a big man too. And it's exciting to at least see Indianapolis peaking right now as a team. And like you said, their window is now, and they have to feel good about what they did to Tennessee. Man, Tennessee. Their fortunes have changed. Since you brought up the rookie class, by the way, I just got to get this in there, and this is more of like a mea culpa thing. Justin Jefferson just looks like
incredible.
He grew 5 years of development in like 1 year. I mean, watching him at LSU last year, I didn't see this guy. He looks like physically he's on a different plane than the players he's playing against. And his length, that combined with his length and just this, meant he really has like the my ball mentality, but more than that, it's just a my field mentality. He put on a show last night, and they have to at least be thrilled at that. Okay, speaking of thrills, a lot of people were thrilled when Alex Smith got back on the field, but it was not great. My thing, Davis, was saying like it was a horror movie. You're watching it like through your fingers because you just didn't want to see anything bad happen to him. He wasn't moving almost at all. He moved better, but most importantly, last week he filled the air with footballs, 55. And the running back scored 3 touchdowns, or he could have had a pretty big game. And looking ahead at Washington's schedule, there's a lot of games coming up. Cincinnati, Dallas this week, next week, Seattle and Carolina. Are we liking this? Are we thinking that, we already love Terry McLaurin, but got Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson. Is Washington not a fantasy wasteland anymore?
Well, they did throw, what was it? Alex Smith had like 63 dropbacks and 58 passes.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if we'll get that sort of absurd offensive pace. I mean, you do have to say though, how bad is Dwayne Haskins, right? Like, is this guy like the worst rookie quarterback ever to not be able to be playing instead of Alex Smith and Kyle Allen? Like, it's very tough. I mean, I will say it does seem like Smith is good for McLaurin. It does seem like Smith is good for Logan Thomas, and then the JD the McKissick stuff is
that's like that's like hitting the backdoor cover, or hitting it on the with McKissick, because that's gonna allow you to cheat basically in PPR leagues, and you're gonna have a running back 2 every week. So that's like the if you picked up McKissick, that's the classic shark move, like seeing through all the perceptions that we have or feelings about upside or offenses, and just looking at the reality. When we saw Alex Smith get in at quarterback, that meant was going to be all McKissick, and we'll see about Gibson. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, and I guess what's just interesting to me is like Antonio Gibson was a wide receiver in college, and it's kind of like Ronald Jones, right? Except he has transformed himself from what he was in college, and now he's a north-south bruiser, right? He's the goal line back, he's the first down back, and I mean it's incredible to see someone learn the position in that short of a time and be effective. I mean, to me, it looks like Gibson's ceiling is the moon. Like Gibson at this point, I know he has not been as good, but like wouldn't surprise me if he outproduced DeAndre Swift, right? Because because we know he has the receiving skill set, he just hasn't flashed it yet. And I don't know if anyone really projected him to be able to pick up, the north-south running this fast, and he's been great.
Yeah, it was whenever Adrian Peterson told us that Washington just had a different plan than him.
Yeah.
It was Gibson. It was worth heeding, and it was a little bit of a slow start. It'll just be fun to watch this offense. And Scott Turner, lots of pass volume. We saw Kyle Allen fantasy viable and keeping his guys viable. Panic. Let's talk about panic, because I want to make sure to touch on the subjects of the day before we go off on tangents of tangents. Drew Brees. Now I'm saying it might not be just 5 broken ribs, might be more than 5 broken ribs. So is the move here, everybody's going to overreact and price in too much of a drop off from this offense, or is the move the falling knife and get out now because what's going to happen? Or we can just talk about what's going to happen, or how we feel about the Saints quarterback situation. This is really weighty stuff as they're in this Super Bowl window. And I think that Sean Payton, he was testy on the Zoom call. He's not happy. So presumably not having a plan, this is like the Steelers last year, like not having a real plan may be a problem. Is it going to be a problem in fantasy? What do you see in the crystal ball for the Saints without Brees?
There is not one Saints player I was starting before that I wouldn't start now, right? Like if your team was structured to use Manny Sanders, you're not downgrading him to be using Zach Pascal now. If you were starting Jared Cook before, you're still probably starting him now. Obviously, Kamara and Michael Thomas are not altered. These are the 2 scenarios where it gets interesting. The first is on ESPN, where Taysom Hill is listed at tight end. He was actually, until this morning, listed as a tight end on Yahoo as well, but they changed it, right? They said... Yeah, so they said at the beginning of the season they have the right to reserve to change Taysom Hill's position, and they moved him to quarterback. But I don't know every fantasy football provider out there. So if Taysom Hill is at tight end, spend whatever you have left on Fab to get him, right? And start him at tight end for every game that Brees is out. Because the way I'm projecting it moving forward is about 80-20 at quarterback, where Jameis is going to be in there on every situation that requires a pass, right? But they're going to use Taysom in the red zone. They're going to use Taysom in short yardage. They'll do, I mean, just the classic Saints shit, right? We got the, sorry, Joe. We got we got the Deontay Harris swing pass. Like, I mean, I can just see the wheels turning in Sean Payton's head right now. But where it gets the second scenario where it's actually interesting to me is, so, in the Football Guys Players Championship, right? The FFPC main event, these really high stakes tournaments with, $500,000 to first place. You could not win, I think. I think it would be impossible, no matter how good the rest of your team is, to win without Josh Allen, without Russell Wilson, without Kyler Murray, and without Patrick Mahomes, right? Because those guys are having such historic years that your Kirk Cousins team, your Tua team is not matching those guys. But if I told you that Jameis Winston was QB2 from week 11 to week 17, that could happen, right? Because he's done it, right? Jameis Winston he's done it. He is the one guy out there. Now, I don't think that's the most likely situation. I actually think it could go the other way, where he tries, because I think he might just try so hard to not turn the ball over, to just be the game manager, because he wants a contract, right? Jameis Winston got screwed. He should have gotten the Phillip Rivers contract, and he didn't. So I think he just wants to win like 4 games here for the Saints and get paid. But I do think there is, I'll call it just napkin math, a 20% chance that we just get the full Jameis experience of him throwing bombs to Michael Thomas and those guys for the rest of the year.
It's wild to ponder. Although when you brought up the idea of Winston playing it very safe, that's, I think, more like what we're going to see. Although what we saw on Sunday was just a mess. It was just a nightmare. And you wonder how much Taysom Hill we're going to see. I would think that, knowing that in 2021 you're likely going into the season with only Taysom Hill under contract at quarterback, that you would want to get the full Taysom Hill experience, or just find out what that entails. And what's the other thing that's fascinating to me is that this is the first team that I can really remember that has 2 modes on offense. They've practiced the Taysom Hill parts of the playbook and run those plays enough. It's almost like Sean Payton, by doing it, by insisting on running these plays, often in high leverage situations in games, laid the perfect foundation to fully flip the switch, or at least flip the switch from drive to drive, or do something unorthodox that really could make this team a handful. I don't know when we're going to see Drew Brees again. Anyway, it's unpredictable, though, and Peyton's not really giving us any indication. And I do think that the defense, you saw the defense last week say, like, we got this. And that's what happened last year when Brees went down. The defense was like, we got this. And I wonder if that's, again, how they're going to redefine themselves, more like Latavius Murray. And you're probably right, like your overall note you hit at the beginning, like, you're not getting off of Kamara or Thomas because of this. And hopefully play calling and just this offense being a well-oiled machine compensates for any drop off if it's clunky. And just at the chat room, by the way, because we're hanging out. Thank you for coming out on this Tuesday afternoon. If there's anything on your mind, let us know. Like Sean Starr was saying, is Marquise Brown worth holding? I still say yes, but I'm probably going to.
Who are you dropping him for at this point of the year?
Exactly.
Like the time to drop him would have been, in week 4, right? You drop him for Michael Pittman in week 4. You drop him for Jalen Reagor coming off of the short-term IR. Like who are you dropping him for now? You going to drop him for Jakeem Grant? Like Jakeem Grant is just Hollywood Brown, but plays for the Dolphins.
Right, or Brashad Perryman or something. I mean, look, if it was in a short bench league, I can understand not waiting around.
Yeah, but what is it? The ESPN leagues, it's default 16-man rosters, so you can drop them there.
Right. Although that being said, I'd be ready to pounce if things start to look up, just because of that Dallas, Cleveland, Jacksonville Giants finish to the schedule and what can happen. Lamar Jackson's actually looking better as a passer the last 2 games. The conditions. We've had, a handful of games the last couple of weeks where you just have to throw out the results as a sense of where we are with players because of the conditions. And he's improving as a passer, and against those opponents, he can still look good. Some other hot button players. I know someone was asking earlier about James Conner. There's a whole range of just it's the Steelers offense. They're going to produce running back production. It's just a residue of what they're doing. But there's any number of James Conner based narratives to explain what's happening, like he's wearing down, or this is why the Steelers haven't totally committed him.
Well, he's just not special,
right?
Like that's all it is. It's just that the offense that they had back in 2018 when James Conner was a crusher is, first off, it was structured around needing to give the ball to a running back 300 times, because that was the offense that they'd had designed for the last 4 years. And also Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson were not on those teams, right? The secondary wide receivers and the tight end options was different. But now they're doing all this stuff out of empty, right? They're playing Ray McCloud and James Washington. Mm-hmm. And Ray McCloud is bad at everything except running in a straight line really fast. And they found a way to make that work for them. But what, I mean, you have Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Chase Claypool. What are you going to do? You're going to hand the ball off? No. You're gonna throw 7-yard passes because those guys are incredible. They're always open. You could literally say those 3 guys are just always open because they're all so good. Even Juju, who many people tried to bury him after a kind of a slow start. I mean, Juju now is just like the best possession wide receiver in the NFL, really.
Right. Yes. See, now this is where the whole Steelers fan neurosis starts to cloud my vision, because it's kind of difficult to completely process that the Steelers are 9-0 and the talk or class of the NFL or something like that, because they should have lost to Tennessee. They should have lost to Baltimore. I mean, as a Steelers fan, I'm just thinking of they should have lost to Dallas, to Dallas, Dallas. So, but terrible. You're right that these elements, because Juju's like, he's old man game in the young man frame, I mean, he's got that, and he and Roethlisberger riff that way. We've seen that already earlier in his career.
Yeah, he's the foxhole guy, which I bet I probably learned from listening to you and Waldman, the idea of the foxhole guy. But I mean, if it's 3rd and 7, you could close your eyes and go, okay, Juju is gonna head fake off the line and run right to the hash, and he's going to catch a 7-yard, a hitch, I guess. But like, that's the play. Like, you just know what they're going to do.
And he's got steely nerves about, he's going to take a big hit if he has to make that catch. He's going to get his both feet down. He's going to execute when you need him to execute. Like Hines Ward had that going for the Steelers. And then Deontay Johnson just stay on the field. That's the silky smooth guy. But Chase Claypool, going back to the rookie class really quickly, I couldn't be more thrilled to be so wrong about Chase Claypool, because it isn't like you couldn't have seen this on his Notre Dame tape, but it was against guys that were facing Notre Dame, it wasn't against NFL players,
right?
And it seemed like his game, I'm always wary of guys whose games in college are predicated on their physical advantages, when those physical advantages will not be as pronounced in the NFL, but they still look as pronounced because he's playing with this edge. Again, I don't know how to quantify this, Davis, but when we're looking at why some of these rookies are hitting, it's not just because of, you would point to production or point to measurables or something. There's just that factor in their game where they're not only not shrinking from the game, but it's almost like they knew that they were, because this was supposed to be the year the rookies were going to ramp up slowly. But some of these rookies look like they come in and not being the thing that is to shy away from. They're now dictating what's happening already. So it is exciting, and it means Roethlisberger, by the way, quarterback. You're talking about not having one of those top 4 quarterbacks. Roethlisberger's had 2 good weeks back to back in fantasy terms, and then you've got Jacksonville this week. But after Baltimore, you got Washington, Buffalo, and Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Indianapolis. Man, there's still a lot of good games left on the schedule. Since we're talking about quarterback play and players you're not trusting, and by the way, on the James Conner thing, we ended up far away from James Conner, but that's okay. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if this doesn't turn around, like in the sense that this is a recipe that's working for them, like what you described, Davis. I mean, this is what works for this team, and it doesn't need to be James Conner. Nick Faribault brought up that it's a kind of a finesse offensive line, like you said. They're not they're not mashing downhill. So we'll see. And across the state in Philadelphia, if the Steelers fans, I was talking about this with Jason Wood, Steelers fans is neurosis. I don't even know what it is with the Eagles fans and Philadelphia fans, Davis. Like, I don't know what we would.
Well, I don't see where you could feel all that great about being an Eagles fan. I think it seems
right?
brutal.
Well,
I mean,
as soon as they evoke blowing it up, right? Yeah.
What's actually crushing them is every other team being so bad. If the Giants or the Cowboys were a 6-win team, they could just be done with this, and we could get 4 games of Jalen Hurts, and we could figure out, like, is Jalen Hurts going to be our quarterback next year? Do we need to be drafting, these big run-blocking offensive linemen so that we can build a team around Jalen Hurts? Or are we going to try and make it work with Carson Wentz and draft another wide receiver next year, draft another tight end next year, draft another pass-catching running back next year? And they can't do it because they can win the division, right? And you can't start. I don't like, as much as Carson Wentz has sucked, I don't really think you can go to the Jalen Hurts offense mid-season right now if you have a chance of making the playoffs. So, I mean, I can't imagine being an Eagles fan. I feel like of the 32 teams right now, that might be the team that I would least want to be a fan of, honestly.
Well, because of the hope, right? That's the thing, is on the horizon.
It's very fake hope because whoever, even if they win their first playoff game, if they matched up against the Seahawks or the Cardinals in the divisional round, I mean, they'd get ran out of the building.
Yeah, and whatever, even if they pull off some upset or something. But the point is, in a larger, like, mass consciousness hive brain, there's murmurs and talk of blowing it up, right? Doug Peterson's out, Carson Wentz, like, let's move on, let's hit the reset button. Like you said, in season, that's awkward when you're in first place to be talking about that, which really just shows how absurd the NFC East is. I mean, Davis, I would figure someone like you would really embrace this too. Like, it isn't often in the NFL that we get something that is truly purely absurd. Like, this division is just absurd. It's so bad that even when these teams play each other, they hand the games back and forth in the last minutes because they don't. I was saying to Cecil, like, ties exist because sometimes neither team deserves to win. Like Philadelphia and Cincinnati earlier this year. That's like this division in a nutshell. So setting up a situation where on one hand, you're thinking about blowing up the franchise, but on the other hand, they're in first place while you're talking about it. But now you have this, with the exception of Miles Sanders, who looks fantastic, by the way. You have this, like, feeling of trepidation about trusting even old Travis Fulgham now in any situation. Are we feeling insecure about the Eagles on a game-to-game basis, or because this is supposed to be the offense coming back together, everything's going to be fine now? Is it going to be fine?
No, it's not. It is not going to be fine because I don't know. I'm not a guru, right? Like, I can see what quarterbacks are doing wrong, but I don't know why. Like, I don't know if Wentz is in his head. I don't know if he is making the right reads, but the wrong plays are being called. I don't know if, Rager always looks open, but he's running the wrong routes.
Right.
Like, I don't know, but I just know that Carson Wentz is playing bad. And I don't see, I also think the other thing is the Eagles looked so great in that Super Bowl season, and, they had all the cool plays. They were going for it on fourth down. They were really aggressive. Right. And so we all thought of Doug Peterson as a really good coach. But it actually seems now like that was just his playbook, and they haven't improved, they haven't advanced, they haven't made any positive changes, and everyone's just used to their shit. And so it's just like, you're the Eagles, you're bad, we're not afraid of you. And I see no solution that looks implementable week to week. That doesn't mean that Carson Wentz is going to be bad forever. It doesn't mean that the Eagles can't win 10 games next year, but I don't see it flipping now.
Yeah, it's going to be Cleveland. Going up to Cleveland this week, and we'll see if Wentz can string together any kind of drives and keep the run defense from getting mulched. Then this is a Seattle game and a Green Bay game where Wentz is going to be on the spot, and then Arizona and Dallas in week 15 and 16 too. So it wouldn't surprise me if they can get something going. But you're right that when you watch Wentz, it's just a mess. It's just, like you said, like almost like you don't even know where you would start to fix things. It's like watching Drew Lock right now. Like, where would you even start if you were going to fix that? By the way, since we're talking about NFC, just to go like big picture and NFL stuff, who do we like in the NFC right now? Who if you had to put a chip on one team, to go to the Super Bowl and face Patrick Mahomes? Because that's what's going to happen. Who would it be?
One team, I mean, first of all, I don't think there's any team in the NFL that would be favored on a neutral field against the Chiefs.
No.
You know what? I'm going to stick with my preseason answer. I think it's the Cardinals. And this is why.
Yeah.
If Cliff just figures it out, if he just is like, you know what? It's 4th and 2. I have Kyler Murray. I have Chase Edmonds. I have Christian Kirk. I have DeAndre Hopkins. I can get these 2 yards. You know, they would be unstoppable, right? Like you point at what have their big mistakes been? What have their terrible losses been? They've all been failing or not going for it in short yardage situations, right? I mean, let's even look. Like, I don't even know. Have they gotten blown out yet this year? I don't think they have.
No.
So the Lions lost. That was terrible, right? But it wasn't because they played bad. It was because of, again, poor decisions in the second half in terms of being aggressive on offense. I guess the one thing you could point to is that the loss to the Panthers was bad. They were just bad in that game. But they beat the Seahawks, right? They went toe to toe. They beat the Bills. Now you could argue they shouldn't have beaten the Bills, but they probably would have again if they just go for it on 4th down. They kick a terrible field goal that doesn't even matter, and they let the Bills come back on them. But yeah, I mean, I think that the answer here is either, to me, the Seahawks or the Cardinals. But I know it's only been 2 weeks, but like, what is Russell Wilson's deal?
Well, yeah.
Do you have an answer? Like, what is, because Kyler hasn't had one of those games where he's looked terrible passing yet, but Russ has 2 in a row now where he looks lost.
Yeah, well, he just looks like you mentioned this earlier about the Eagles and Doug Peterson, and the NFL is brutal, by the way. I mean, imagine if to continue to be you in your life, you had to consistently reinvent yourself, like a new season of a television show or something like that. Like, eventually we'd all fail miserably, like, and go stale. Like in the NFL, it's like a shark or something. You have to keep moving, or they devour you. And with Russell Wilson, it sure looked like the Rams just devoured him. Brandon Staley, the Rams defense, like they were ready for what he was going to do, and Jalen Ramsey blotting out DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett is a little hurt.
I'm gonna push back on that. I don't think I watched that game back this morning, actually. I don't think Jalen Ramsey blotted out DK Metcalf at all. I think that it's in Russ's head now not to throw towards Ramsey, not to throw towards Patrick Peterson, and we're going to see that on Thursday. I think it's something that Pete Carroll is doing, or something that Russ himself is thinking of, like, okay, in our game plan is for Metcalf to remove Patrick Peterson away from the ball. Our game plan is to move Jalen Ramsey away from the ball, because if you go back and watch some of those plays, not only is Metcalf beating Ramsey, but he is burning him. Like, there was the 3rd down incompletion of Freddie Swaim. Metcalf had Ramsey on the ground and was standing in the end zone, and Russ checked it down. So while yes, Ramsey did a better job against Metcalf than Tre'Davious White had done the week prior, I also just think that DK Metcalf is never covered. And if you throw the ball at the DK Metcalf against Jalen Ramsey, he wins that battle a big chunk of the time, I think.
I think you're right to point to Wilson's mental state. I think you're right. So again, if we're going to take a walk down narrative street, let Russ cook. And for the first half of the season, it seemed brilliant and everyone was happy, right? Winning cures everything and all that. But as soon as it starts to go badly, like in Buffalo, the difference was the turnovers, including one he threw in the end zone. And then that starts to say, well, we've got to rein this in. Of course, the problem is they don't have anybody. Alex Collins. I mean, they need Chris Carson back. They can't go back to the shelter of that running game. It's kind of like risk taking, like trying to get someone who's not a risk taker to take a risk. They're like, okay, I'll do that as long as it goes well. But if it starts to go badly, we're going back to my plan. And you wonder what happened there. Although the Rams have also been a team that generally plays the Seahawks very well. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. There was a game like this. I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago. There was a game when the Rams totally shut down Wilson, but another game that was a classic shootout. Going back to the original question that got us here, I think you're right. Whether we're talking about Kyler Murray in Arizona or Russell Wilson in Seattle, if we're talking about the NFC bracket, we're talking about the quarterbacks. That's why in New Orleans,
Right.
I think they announced today that there's not going to be any Mardi Gras parades in 2021. So I think everyone's just shell shocked in general. But without, well, even if you have Drew Brees, honestly, this is partially why the Saints have been coming up short. It's when you get to January, it's a quarterback game. I know that San Francisco in their running game carried the ball for them down the field last year. But if we're talking about who's going to represent the NFC, we're talking about, is it Aaron Rodgers? Is it Kyler Murray? Is it Tom Brady? That's what the conversation really comes back to. And you never know. Like last time we saw Murray and Wilson, it was an incredible back and forth game.
Yeah, it was haymakers.
Like and like you said, it came down to coaching decisions, really. And can Cliff get out of his own way?
But that's why I'm not that confident in it. Is I don't actually, because I've seen very little.
But the alternative's Carroll.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, though, is Pete Carroll has always been comfortable being aggressive on fourth downs, even when he made bad decisions in like every other area, like running on second and long, and all that stuff we know is bad. It's like it's kind of like Tomlin, actually, where like 80% of the time he just does it the way it's always been done, but then sometimes he loses his mind and is like, we're going forward on 4th and 7, or we're going for 2 here, that's like Pete Carroll just loves that, to be aggressive like that.
I do hope that one thing that while we're assailing Peterson, Peterson was right to go for that too. When they were down 4 points, that was the right move. In general, going for 2 is the right move. Going for 2 is the right move a lot more than it is exercised in the NFL right now. And I think Matt Rule, by the way, should be good at this, or at least not being on the conservative side of this. That being said, he's run 4 fake punts already this year, which is like too many fake punts. That's too many fake. And back-to-back weeks, the last 2 weeks. You never run a fake punt 2 weeks in a row, So
yeah, they're ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, go back to Matt Rule, like the fullback run on 4th and 1 when you have Christian McCaffrey with the game on the line. So he'll get past those things, but he has the Panthers kind of ahead of schedule. Another big picture NFL thing, like who's your MVP right now? Or it can be fantasy MVP, or it can just be somebody that you want to take this moment out to recognize that has captured your imagination this year.
Well, I want it to be Kyler Murray to be the actual MVP, but he's not going to win. Patrick Mahomes is going to win. The Chiefs are going to win 14 games. He's going to throw for 4,900 yards and 50 touchdowns probably. Yeah. And Kyler will have the best season since Vic, right? He's going to run for 1,000 yards. He's going to throw for 4,000 yards. He's going to have 40 something touchdowns. And if the Cardinals win that division, it might just be a little bit of a voter fatigue thing anyways, where Kyler is the better story. So maybe they do it. And the only reason I want Kyler to win is because I bet on him to win it at really good numbers. Whereas, I love Patrick Mahomes. He's my favorite player, but not as much financial incentive. I think though, you could actually argue that Travis Kelce is the fantasy football MVP because no one is close to him at his position. He has 168 PPR points. The next closest PPR points at tight end is Darren Waller. And, that advantage every single week. I mean, think of all the people you've had to start at tight end this year. I mean, we're picking up Jacob Hollister and Irv Smith Jr. and Kyle Rudolph and Jimmy Grant. And I mean, it's just been so bad. And Kelsey's had one game with less than 12 PPR points. One. Like he just shows up every week. He's the best.
Yeah, he is. He's fantastic. It's great. And looking back at Kelce, he was a fun one to watch from the beginning because he looked so good. I mean, just physically, just like Gronkowski, like a giant, a behemoth who was physically, like his finger was in the light socket and he just played like like a bull out of the chute in a rodeo. I mean, but then he was suspended for a whole year for something that happened at the bowl game, like just something,
Right.
And then he had microfracture surgery right away too.
Microfracture surgery. I mean, if you had somehow known, well, I mean, I remember liking Kelce way back in the day on, when we did our old RotoViz articles and everything, but certainly never thought he was going to be this. But I mean, if you had just been like, look, this guy looks incredible, I'm just going to buy all of him that there is to buy, he would have been the dynasty buy of the century because he's been the number one player at his position for a decade.
And now he's converged with Patrick Mahomes, who really and truly like Davis, how do we end up at Patrick Mahomes? He's touched by some sense of inner calm, or like he came from a universe or a planet where like he understands Earth is like minor league. He's just having fun. He's some sort of higher form appearing as a human to just school the NFL and have fun with it, because it never seems like he's that emotional. It never really seems like he's surprised at anything that he does, and we are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just he knows how great he is, and so things that we regard as abnormal or incredible or magisterial, he's like, I could do this when I was 18.
It's like he and Steph Curry, I think, have like a similar
He
sort
is
of
the
wavelength.
Steph Curry of the NFL. Yeah, where it's like nothing Steph Curry does surprises him because he has 100% confidence and belief that he can do it. And also, by the way, I think that a huge thing for Mahomes is he's never had a coach tell him no. Yeah. He has never, it's not like at Texas Tech he was making, like, he made all sorts of stupid decisions at Texas Tech, crossbody throws, and he would let himself get hit, and he wouldn't slide, and he just was like playing backyard football at Texas Tech. And then he shows up to Kansas City, and Andy Reid, I'm sure literally he shows up for rookie minicamp and is, he was like probably talking to Andy Reid and threw like a 64-yard zip line to Tyreek Hill. And Andy Reid was like, Patrick, you do you. We're going to win 12 games this year. We're going to do the best we can. And then next year it's your team. And I bet Andy Reid, if you had to guess, what do you even think Andy Reid has ever told Patrick other than like, what do you think about this? Or like, I literally bet the Chiefs coaching staff does not tell him what to do. Seriously.
I know, no. I just picture Andy Reid saying, "I love you." Damn.
You're the best. Thank you for being in my life. Like, let's go score some points. Yeah,
exactly. Well, you bring up a really great point, because you think about like a neural network that's learning, right? So you want a quarterback in college to really be able to explore the full range, and like you said, not be hemmed in, to learn and have their own plot of what works and what doesn't, and what they're capable of, and the limits of what they're capable of. Because that's the whole thing. I bring this up like almost every week, it seems like, that I think that the special sauce of the NFL compared to any other sport except maybe hockey is that you have incredible athletes. You have athletes that have pushed, you have people who are already unbelievably innately talented athletically, but then they're pushing their bodies to the very limit of what their physical frames can do. And then they're playing a game with other people that are right at that limit, and everything is like on a razor's edge, which, again, hockey, right? Because it actually literally is played on a razor's edge. So it's just, all these things that happen are astonishing, like astounding, because it's humans right at their limit. And Patrick Mahomes knows where that limit is for him, because like you said, he's been allowed to find it. And we used to really value quarterbacks coming from these highly structured, quote, pro style offenses. But I wonder what we really want is college, just like it was for us, right? It's fun, it's experimentation.
I mean, that's why, look, I mean, these Gardner Minshew now, every Washington State quarterback, or I guess, where's Leach at now? Mississippi State? Like every air raid quarterback from now for the next 15 years is going to be a 6th round draft pick, regardless of their arm strength or how tall they are or anything, because one, they get a massive amount of reps, right? If you're an air raid quarterback for 2 years, that probably means you threw 1,200 live passes or something like that, like an absurd number compared to, a Big Ten quarterback probably throws 800 passes in 3 seasons. And it also means if you were an air raid quarterback in college, you made all your own reads. Your coach wasn't like, okay, you throw to this guy on this play. If it's not open, you check down. It's like, no, you have 4 different reads, and we only have 10 plays in the whole playbook, and you have to know them perfectly, and you have to be able to make the throws. Now, the throws aren't hard. They're going to be easier throws than, the Ohio State playbook or whatever, but you have to figure out the defense on your own. I can't do it for you. And there's going to be a big demand for that style of quarterback. And we've already seen it, right?
Yeah. And this all makes me think something too, that the esteemed Eric Stoner showed up in my brain via messages about how the defenses, there's a lot of bad defenses, and the bad defenses, they make the Jared Goffs look good. They make those kinds of offenses, Kyle Shanahan's offense, look good. But there are some pretty competent defenses that, or like what the Rams did to Russell Wilson last week. It's going to be interesting to see as we talk about the quarterbacks too, which of the defenses can maybe define how the playoff bracket thins out. So we'll see. And of course, folks, Davis Mattek, follow him, and all of the great places you can find him. And as we go on, we've got just 10 minutes left, so we get to go off the rails. So this is where I was going to start this week. As, by the way, I feel like I should mention, since we're off the rails, it's like, hey, everybody, the pandemic is really on now, like really, really on. So just be safe, folks. Just be safe. I feel like everyone I'm talking to, if you listen to my show, then you probably are taking appropriate steps and things like that. But just be safe, folks. Be very safe.
It's very, very real out there. My girlfriend has an internship at a hospital right now, and their voluntary stuff is done. Well, I live in Missouri, which is not a mask mandate state, so you can just do whatever you want whenever you want here in Missouri, and it's rough out there.
Yeah, and for healthcare people out there, I mean, folks,
prayers up.
Yeah, because it's like we're turning a generation of healthcare workers into like Vietnam vets, for what they've had to experience and see, and they're really holding the country together right now. And we're gonna stress test the system, and it's people. It's always people in the end. But again, in some ways we're here to be real. I wanted to be real, but in some ways we're here as a distraction. Speaking of distractions, what are you looking forward to when football's over? Because you can see it now. Like once Thanksgiving is in sight, you can see that the end of the NFL season's in sight. And while we love the NFL and we center our professional lives around it, and maybe even we center
I'm always ready for January, man.
Exactly. Once you can see Thanksgiving, it's like, all right. So what are you looking forward to?
I gotta say, I'm just really looking forward to being able to read for more than like 30 minutes at a time. Because I try and read 10 pages in the morning and 10 pages at night, but most of the time that's about all I get in, right? Because in the morning I'm like, I got 900 things to do today. I gotta let the dogs out. I gotta record this. I gotta write this. I gotta alter this projection. It's like, so it's hard to quiet the mind. And then at night, I mean, you're just beat, man. You're just like, wow, I craned my neck on my computer for 13 hours today, and I'm ready to pass out. So that's my biggest thing is I just I try and read, pretty much as I can during the off season.
Yeah. Why is reading so important? Like, why do you think it just nourishes something that only it can?
I've always thought about this because like I was an English major in college. I've always loved to read books, and like I don't know if I have a great answer, right? But there is just something I think it's probably because it's like going for a jog for your brain, right? That's actually probably what it is. It is your brain has to do the calisthenics on its own, whereas when you watch TV, it's all that work is getting done for you. Is sort of my guess.
Yeah, it's not passive. And I mean, it is passive in a way because you're just sitting there. That's what it means. It's totally physically passive, but you're concentrating your energy and your intent in, like you said, your imagination. And I feel like when you read, I read so much more when I was younger too, and I'm with you. I feel like when you read, this is what makes books so special, right? Because it's like, I don't know, you read like Voltaire, and it's really like having a conversation with somebody that's not alive anymore.
Yes. Which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and understanding the wavelength that human civilization and reality and understanding of itself settled at for a time, and it informs you like how things are different and how things aren't different. And then you integrate it into like your intuition or your way of processing things that happen, right? Because that's really what, beginning of the pandemic, like it's just been a challenge for like you're processing things that are happening and assigning like meaning and purpose and understanding yourself, because a lot of the things that I think were moorings for people's identity and like what made up their life, or at least for now, like on ice. But since we talk about reading, I was going to mention, I had this question in my head too whenever I knew that you were going to come on the show today, Davis. What, if anything, that you've read do you feel like has, and it doesn't have to necessarily even be what you read, it could be music, it could be a film, do you think helped prepare you to live through a pandemic?
Infinite Jest, probably.
Okay.
Or just like the whole David Foster Wallace idea of like being honest with your own brain and about your own neuroses and being depressed and being anxious, and just like accepting that that is part of the human experience, I think probably is the answer.
Yes, it's funny. I mean, I kind of knew we were going to go to David Foster Wallace. It's not the first time we brought up David Foster Wallace or Infinite Jest, but it certainly seemed to. It's funny because on one hand, it seems like they anticipate a lot of things, but like you said, it may not really be anticipating as much as just being honest about what's underneath the puppet show. You know, the person like under the puppet show, the thing. You know, the force under that. Because I keep going back and forth. Because it's so funny. I saw somebody say something. There's like, these are very precedented times, you know, like,
Yeah.
like all these things that have happened. I sometimes wonder how much of it is that things are hitting some breaking point or are unprecedented, and some of it is that you just get older and you understand more about the world. And no matter what point in history, like the person that walks around with the long beard with the sign that says the end of the world is here, you know, that we always would have felt like this, you know. Like this burgeoning energy, like stars being born and dying out, you know, like we're Stardust and Carl Sagan and all that stuff. And it seems like certainly, though, a lot of David Foster Wallace, even just the way that he would, I love his essays because he approached things without preconceived notions, like the cruise piece or the piece like about Lobster Fest. And
Yeah.
he was so earnest, you know. And he always saw, and this is where like it's too close to home, is that he always saw like his own failings or his own shortcomings in the things in the world. Not like he, you know, I think he tried to be to not judge anyone except maybe himself, you know.
Right.
So I guess since we're just winding up here, and you talk about reading, give me another thing not having to do with the pandemic, like another book or author that really influenced you or changed how you saw yourself or the world.
Well, I think a great book for everyone in fantasy football, if you like gambling, you like fantasy sports, stuff like that. I think the Nassim Taleb series of books, Black Swan and all of those, I would highly recommend any of them, really. I actually, now that I'm talking about this, I don't even remember the name of the most recent one, which was the one that I thought was the best. I gotta go look this up right now, because they all have fooled by randomness actually is the one that everyone should read. That would be the key. Just if you, and they're not hard reads. Like Nassim Taleb a lot, he rubs people the wrong way inside the books, but they're very brilliant books, and it will likely inspire you to read other books that are, you know, about the theory of the mind and trying to understand the world around us. And it is very good for people in our specific field as well.
Yeah. And I think that anytime you get into those big picture ideas, or you start to move between different levels, it just reminds me of how philosophy and religion and science, you know, these things weren't necessarily considered these walled gardens that were all separate from each other. It was all one task to try to understand or grasp exactly what it is that we're in. And part of that is always how processing it through our minds skew it. I always enjoy. How are you doing, man? How are you holding up? How are you, Davis?
You know, I feel very blessed because I work from home. I have 2 dogs who I love. I have a girlfriend who I love. We live together. And so, you know, my immediate life is so blessed compared to what many people are dealing with, right? Many people have to go into work. Many people have to go into the office. Many people's loved ones are getting sick and dying. You know, many people have seen their jobs, they've been furloughed, they've been reduced pay. If you own a small business, this is a terrible time. So I think the best thing any of you can do if you're listening to this and you're in a situation such as myself, where your life really has, you know, great, you can't go out to dinner, you're going to miss Thanksgiving with your family. Like, yes, that sucks, but there are a lot of people who have it so much worse. And that is what I am trying to focus on the most right now. It's like, yes, a lot of things are terrible right now, but it could be much, much worse.
Yeah, gratitude. Gratitude's never the wrong answer. And I think of Halloween and my wife's son, my stepson Noah, and how it was nothing like Halloween, but he loved it so much because, and so did the people who came out with the candy shoots and things like that, because it was what we had, and it reminded you how much you loved the things that we had before the pandemic, and hopefully what it means we can all come back, as life will eventually come back, with a renewed sense of just love and appreciation for getting to do this, all the ordinary things, all the daily things that we miss, and we love all of you. And please, folks, we're here. Thanks for being with us. Always, it's a privilege to serve. And stay safe, stay classy.